talked about umbras and penumbras. Let's see. And then, let's see, where is it? Oh, no, come on now. Come on now. All right. Oh. Hi. God. All right, if the shoe fits, maybe that's what it is. Make sure I have covered the major stuff, and then I'll get into a couple of areas that need to be talked about. I talked about the vacancies on the court. You've seen the list. Who knows? They're going to make it into its character assassination, and as long as we have a majority in the Senate, we've got some rhinos in the Senate who, fortunately, the Republicans increased the number of U.S. senators. So if Lisa Murkowski from Alaska and Susan Collins from Maine go the way that they often do, they wobble, we've got enough votes still to pass. If necessary, Pence can break a tie. So now, we want to talk about how to predict what the Supreme Court is going to do. Well, I guess I'm one of the few people left who reads the Union Leader every day. And one of the great things in the Union Leader is, the first thing I read is the cartoon section. Because it's really good, most of them, particularly shoe. And this is a shoe prediction about the Supreme Court. And so this to me is a great prediction of what the Supreme Court is going to do on some of these major cases. They're going to decide to send Kavanaugh out for Chinese takeout. So I have no idea. Someone at one of the recent presentations, one of my recent speeches, asked about you've seen these decisions by district court judges, and normally the district court judges only have jurisdiction in the area of their district, the geographical area of their district. So if a New Hampshire district court judge makes a ruling, it's generally good for New Hampshire. If it's appealed to the First Circuit, and the First Circuit does whatever the decision is, it's for all the cases in the First Circuit. Okay, you've seen a few recent decisions against the Trump administration where the district judges have issued injunctions against the enforcement of some Trump policies, and they purport to be universal across the country where these people don't have actual jurisdiction. So there's some articles, and Justice Thomas has written some stuff recently, and he's got a lot of stuff where these cases have to work their way through the Court of Appeals up to the Supreme Court. If Thomas has his way, they're going to jump on all over these people at the district court level and say, you just can't do this stuff. You cannot issue these nationwide injunctions. Now, somebody asked, how come the death penalty cases take so long? Well, you get the death penalty in New Hampshire. We got one person on death row, Addison, who killed a cop. And so he takes an appeal, one and done. New Hampshire Supreme Court affirms, right? And then he starts over. He goes to the federal court and says, there were federal due process violations in the whole thing. First of all, death penalty is unconstitutional because it's cruel and unusual punishment. Secondly, it's applied unevenly because blacks get it more than non-blacks. And then and they go through here and here and here. And finally, you get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court generally denies cert, and they keep on going back again and seeking stays. And the guy is strapped in the gurney, and he's got the IV in his arms and ready to be executed. And the warden is on the phone waiting to hear if the court denies cert one more time, and then they can do it. So there's been in the New Hampshire legislature, there was the state general court during our term, 17 and 18, passed a law that would repeal the death penalty. And the death penalty in New Hampshire is very limited. killing a police officer, very, very few things. Not like some states where it's, Florida or Texas, where there's a lot of things that you can do to get the death penalty. And it was vetoed by the governor, thank goodness. And I used to get emails from people that said, oh, this is terrible, you shouldn't have the death penalty, it's not really a deterrence. And I've said, first of all, it is a deterrence. It's a deterrence against the person who is executed from ever committing another crime. That's number one. Number two, I think that the New Hampshire death penalty statute is much too narrow, should be expanded to cover other crimes, and we need to limit the time frame on all these appeals, the multiplicity of appeals, so that you basically, in the old days, you could have one set of appeals and that was over with, and that was done. So they're going to have the Dems now control the House, the Senate, the Executive Council. They're going to have a death penalty repeal statute again. We'll see what happens with Sununu, whether he vetoes it again or not. Who knows? So the religious liberty stuff, the cake maker in Colorado, he won his case, and now some transgender person has come in and said wants to have a cake made by him. The first one was about gays. Now a transgender person has challenged his refusal to make a cake for their transgender coming out or something of that sort. And so the same administrative body in Colorado that found the baker violated the law has now found him violating this law again, and so he's going to go back into the federal system and try to finally slap them down again. And of course, you know about the Little Sisters of the Poor. In Obamacare, they were required to have coverage for contraception and lactation services and stuff like that. Well, there's a case from 1925 that's called Pierce versus the Society of Sisters. And it talks about whether or not you can send a child to a religious school instead of a public school. Can you be required to send your child to public school? The case said, fundamental theory of liberty upon which all governments of this union rest excludes any general power of the state to standardize its children by forcing them to accept instruction from public teachers only. And the Compulsory Education Act requires every parent, guardian, blah, 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 to send him to public school. And it's an unreasonable interference with the liberty of the parents and guardians to direct the upbringing of their children. It violates the 14th Amendment, equal protection. And so Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious organizations are still fighting Obamacare type of things, which is one of the reasons why Obamacare, in some form or another, may be reheard in some version. But it's going to be important to see what happens in the 2020 elections. 2020 elections are important for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're going to see, before the 2020 elections, we're going to see what the composition of the court's going to be. Okay, so now what's happening is, what happens in 2020 that is of tremendous importance to every state? If you look at the Constitution booklet, look in the Declaration of Independence, and call your attention to the signers page, which is page 7. And look at, over on the right-hand side, the signers from Massachusetts, John Hancock, he had this big signature. And look at the last signature, the last person who signed. Elbridge Gerry. Gerry. That's the correct pronunciation. And from him, his name has been bastardized into using the term gerrymandering. Okay. In 2020, every 10 years under the Constitution, we have to have a national census, which of course they're fighting now over whether or not there's going to be a citizenship question in there. And based on the census, the next year, 2011, the states will be required to revise all their electoral districts, federal and state. And the Supreme Court's previously ruled that the districts need to make sure that every person has an equal, one man, one vote. That's the theory. So the in the Constitution and in the New Hampshire Constitution, the process of setting electoral districts is a political process by the legislature. Well, last year, when I was in the legislature with Mark, somebody introduced a bill there were a couple of bills. One was, let's have an independent commission to redistrict. And we'll have appointments of this kind and appointments of this kind, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a guy who was, believe it or not, supposedly a Republican. He was a computer guy. And he said, let's turn it over to a computer company to generate an algorithm to do the maps so that everybody is equal. One vote, one. And I said, don't we all remember, I spoke against that. I said, there's a saying in computer programming, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You run it, you do your coding, you produce an algorithm, you print out your districts, and you look at it and say, I don't think I like that. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, print it out again, another one, until he finally. This is not something that should be delegated to a computer company or an independent commission. It is a political process that should be done by the legislature. And if you want to call it gerrymandering, hey, go for it. But it's lasted for us for 200 years, 200 plus years, and I'm fine with it. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. I told you that no Supreme Court justice has ever been impeached. Been a district court judge. There was a district court judge in Miami. He was over from Fort Lauderdale. He sat in Miami. Black guy, Al C. Hastings. And he was charged in a criminal case with the president of the Black Bar Association in some sort of bribery conspiracy case. And they put the squeeze on his friend to try to get him to rat out the judge, but he wouldn't. And the head of the National Bar Association went to prison. They tried Al C. Hastings, and Hastings and his girlfriend defended himself, and he was acquitted. Not guilty. Not guilty is not the same as innocent. It's not guilty. Right. All right. So someone in the federal court administrative office sent the whole package of stuff, including the wiretaps and everything else, to the House of Representatives. They brought up articles of impeachment. They had a trial in the Senate. He was convicted and impeached, removed from office. And where is he now?
House of Representatives.
He's in his second or third term as a U.S. congressman from Fort Lauderdale. Because he's in a gerrymandered district that is predominantly black. Go figure. Right? So, and now the latest thing is that he's got some sort of scandal brewing about payoffs for sexual favors or something like that. There's all sorts of rumors kicking around, but those rumors, they kick around about everybody these days. So,
Croc TV.